The last part of the wise woman's speech to David is fairly tricky, both in terms of the Hebrew. There are some really tricky spots that we're going to have to work through, but also in terms of the flow of ideas. So I wanted to, before we get to the nitty-gritty of the verse-by-verse translation and discussion, I wanted us to look at the speech as a whole and just try to follow the flow. So just to remind you, the issue is, in this mock case, that she is pretending that she had two sons who fought. One killed the other, and now the rest of the family are saying we need to avenge the blood of the murdered son by killing your other son. And in doing so, she says, they will wipe out all of my inheritance. My husband is dead. I'll have no sons. There'll be nobody to inherit my father's or my husband's land, and so our name will die out. That's the imaginary case that she puts before David. And in that case, there are two options that David could choose. He could judge harshly and say, nope, the blood must be avenged. Your son, your other son, your remaining son must die. Or he could judge leniently and say, your other son, even though he murdered his brother, his life will be spared so that your family name doesn't die out, isn't eradicated. And as we've just seen in the previous videos, David does indeed judge leniently. So that's the background as we go into her final speech here. And I think the key thing to remember as we go into these last few verses of her speech is that the woman doesn't come out of character. So when Nathan, for example, is giving his parable to David, he tells the story, but then he directly addresses David. He comes out of the story, as it were, and says, "You are the man." But the woman doesn't do that. She never takes off the mask, as it were. And you can see that because in verse 15 she says, "Now I've come to say this to my lord the king because the people have made me afraid." In other words, my family, who are threatening to kill my surviving son, have made me afraid. So there's the evidence that she hasn't taken off the mask, as it were. So she's cunningly now relating her case to the case of David with Absalom and Amnon, but she's doing so not in the direct way that Nathan the prophet did, but in an indirect way, by remaining in character, as it were. So with that in mind, I think that the best way to negotiate these verses, and there's various ways through, so this is just one of several, is as follows. The people have made me afraid. The people have said, give us your other son so that we can kill him in judgment. And so I thought to myself, I'm going to go to the king. He has the ultimate legal judgment. Maybe he will hear, and maybe he will judge leniently. He has the choice. Will he judge harshly or will he judge leniently by preventing this second death? The word of my lord the king will set me at rest if he judges leniently. And sure enough, he has judged leniently, so she's feeling very relieved. But now, still in character, she says, "But hang on, David, I'm really confused now, because you judged leniently in my case, so why did you judge harshly in your similar case with Absalom? The king doesn't bring his banished one home again. In not bringing Absalom back, you are in effect judging harshly. You too have a situation where one son has killed another son. But in your case, you have judged harshly because you're not bringing Absalom home again and restoring relationship with him. Whereas in my case, you judged leniently. And so in a sense, you are convicting yourself because you saw in my case that a lenient judgment was appropriate. And yet in your case, you are implicitly behaving as though the harsh judgment is appropriate. So there we are. That's the flow of thought, or I think probably the most plausible flow of thought through these verses, and it will help you to keep that in mind as we go through the nitty-gritty, some of which, as I've said, can get a bit painfully difficult.